Well, hello there. Where'd you come from? No. All right. Glad you all made it to the talk here on HoloLens. And so we're going to be talking about spatial mapping with the HoloLens and in Unity. Cove.com. I'm an independent consultant, and I help companies with all kinds of different problems, but in particular things around Unity 3D and now moving into augmented reality and HoloLens in particular. Microsoft MVP since 2009, which just means I do a lot of talking and things in forums and help out the community. I've written a couple books, but online you can find my personal blogs at chadcarter.net. Again, the HoloLens training is learnhololens.com. And I've got the device in April, so the very first part of April, or middle of April, I forget now. But since then, I've been doing weekly videos on YouTube. So you can check out the YouTube channel there of Coolness. It's Kewlniss, because I figured if you're not going to spell it right, then just go all the way and not spell it right. So, all right. So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about the HoloLens, the spatial mapping in particular, and I'm going to go over what that means, and then talking about a particular thing called the Holo Toolkit. And so if you're doing any kind of development, whether you use Unity or not, you should definitely be looking at the Holo Toolkit. And I'm going to show you what the process is for scanning the mesh. We're going to do a little demo and deploy to the HoloLens. So let's talk about spatial mapping just for a second before we get into the code. There are a couple of games who utilize spatial mapping, and something's even called spatial understanding to a great degree. And both of these games is made by the same studio, Asabo Studio. But the first one's Fragments. And what's great is with the spatial mapping and the understanding you have, you can determine, okay, well, this is a sittable surface, for example. And so you see here in the image on the PowerPoint, the holographic guy sitting on the couch. In that scene, their game determined, well, hey, there's a chair there, or there's a couch there, and so they sat the person down. If you're in a smaller area that maybe didn't have a place to sit, then the game still works and the person will stand up instead. And so they take a look at the surrounding area of the gameplay area and have their actors, their holographic actors, positioned in the world appropriately. And that's done based off of spatial mapping. Another example is Young Conker from the same folks. And the idea here is you scanned your area, so for example, your living room, and they put coins and stuff all over, your floor, like a trail on your floor going up to the couch, and you can kind of point and click and tell Conker where to go, and he'll kind of go and to that spot, jump up on the couch, and he realizes what your area looks like, and they build at that level, if you will, based off this spatial mapping. All right, so that's enough theory and everything else. Let's actually get to some code. So I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to sit down now. And it's just starting a brand new Unity project. So what I've done, based off time, I'm going to try to go from start to finish with this in Unity. However, it's going to be extremely tight. And so I also want to show a little demo. Some of you may have already seen it, a little RC car running around. That's not what we're making here. We're doing something a little bit, this premise is the same. So the spatial mapping in this game, what we're going to be doing is the same. It's just I'm not going to actually hook up a car and do the controller input and all that stuff. But it's kind of the next step after this demo. So what we're going to do here is scan in this area. I've already done it. So we don't have to wait for all that, but we'll import the mesh into Unity so you can work with different types of data. So if you were going in, you had different rooms in your house or different places, you could scan the area and then save, the scan is actually saved to the HoloLens. And what you can do is actually bring up the website of the IP address with a default on the end. So once you enable that, and this here that we're looking at is the scan of our room right here. So you see the table, and I've already went through and walked around and scanned that. And we might do that here again in a second, depending on time. But I already have a scan. If we don't have time to actually run around, the way that works is I can come in here and hit update, and it will update what you're seeing on the screen here based off the latest data that the HoloLens has happened. Because I actually came in here last night, and last night the format was we had a podium set up, and these two tables were on either side of the room. So since this talk was right after lunch, I was able to use that time during lunch to rescan and update this. So I actually have both scans on here. I was just simply hitting update and then hitting the save button. And when I hit the save button, it just lets me save this mesh. And so the 3D content that you're seeing here is only 22 megs. So it's pretty small for the amount of material that we have scanned in here. Okay. I've already saved it, so I'm not going to save that. Okay, back to Unity. We're just going to create this brand new project. And again, I might have to pull Julia Childs, depending on how time goes, and says, this is how you bake a cake, but here's the cake that's baked. All right, so let's maximize this and make sure that everything's still looking good. Great. Okay, on GitHub, there is some important links here that I want to tell you about. And this one here is kind of hard to see, so let me bring up Notepad. Copy that. All right. So that link is pretty important. github.com/Microsoft/HoloToolkit-Unity. And if you're working with Unity, that's the one that you want. If you're doing your own code with like DirectX, C++, whatever, then there's just a Holo Toolkit that you can also use. But if you're using Unity, then do yourself a favor and immediately when you start a new project, bring in this Holo Toolkit. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So I've already went to GitHub and downloaded that repository. So I'm going to Assets. I'm going to select everything. I don't necessarily want to bring in my examples, and I won't bring in the metadata here. But everything else, and if I did, it wouldn't hurt anything. I'm just not going to. And jump over here to Unity. Make sure I have that selected. The wrong one. Let's bring up the one we just created. All right. Now, just going to drag this straight into the asset folder, and it's going to take a second for these assets to get brought into Unity. But I want you to notice while it's working, up at the top we have game object, component, window, help up at the top of the menu. When we bring this in, it's actually going to modify the Unity editor and add in a menu item of Holo Toolkit. Okay. And while it's doing that, the other thing I want to tell you is this other link here, which you can probably just search for HoloLens development. But Microsoft.com/Microsoft-HoloLens, ENUS, whatever your language is, /developers. And this is where you can get more information on the HoloLens, including the link here to download the tools. Okay? So this is where you'll actually go. You click on that link and you can go and download. Make sure you get Visual Studio Update 3. The Community Edition is free. And so if you are, I forget what the exact dollar amount is. If you make less than that, then you can use Visual Studio Community Edition for free. Has all the same functionality as Professional. So by all means, use that. You can grab the HoloLens Emulator and then Unity itself. So just make sure you have the latest beta version of Unity. As of right now, you need the beta version. But obviously, that will be available as time goes on with the final versions. Okay, so at this point, we actually have the Holo Toolkit in, and you'll notice up here we have this Holo Toolkit menu item. So let me see if I can make that just a tad bit bigger. All right, so Holo Toolkit, kind of hard to see, Holo Toolkit, and then we can do configure two different things that are, well, actually three. We'll do capability settings, and you can do this different ways, but the Holo Toolkit has recently added this, which is beneficial. And these are things that you'd want to say when you're deploying to a Windows environment as a Windows Store app, which a HoloLens app would be a Windows Store app. You have to specify different features or capabilities that your program has. And this is so the users can say, well, yeah, I'm willing to install your program, if it wants to use my microphone or whatever. So, so for example, we want to use microphone. Spatial perception is the most critical thing when you're talking about spatial mapping. That's what lets the device actually scan the environment. And so maybe a user doesn't want you to scan their environment, in which case, obviously the stuff we're talking about won't work then. You can do webcam if you want it, so you can get, it has the RGB cameras, of course. An internet client, if you're doing things for the emulator, you definitely want to pick internet client. Okay, so just picking those. I'll come down and say apply scene settings. And what that did, you notice the game just kind of walked out. Let me take back out of this zoom mode here. All right. So before, my camera had like a skybox and it had a blue color. It had a couple other changes. By simply changing this same configure, say scene settings, it resets your scene to work with the HoloLens. This clipping plane, it might be hard for you to see, but the clipping plane, the near was 0.3. This changed it a little bit further out, 0.85. And of course, you could tweak this for your needs, but these are the defaults that Microsoft suggests, and the Holo Toolkit does all these things. All right, so I'm going to save this scene real quick. So save scene as, I'm just do a new folder here, scenes, and I'll just call it main, assuming I'm actually in something that has focus. All right, now once that's done, I'm going to go click on Holo Toolkit and say apply project settings. And I could have done these in either order. Now this is telling me, hey, that's fine, I can set the project settings, but I need to reload the project, and so I'm going to let Unity do that, so it'll close and come back up. And these are setting different values for the HoloLens store, the Windows Store in particular. So there's documentation. You can go look at these things if you're interested in it. These are things you had to do manually just a few months ago. But again, the Holo Toolkit makes it so you don't have to worry about it anymore. All right, so I was afraid that Unity is not like my screen every once in a while, and I have to kind of resize it to make sure everything looks well. So if I'm doing this and something looks weird on the screen, let me know so I can make sure that what I'm seeing is what you're seeing. Okay, so all that was just set up to get going with the HoloLens. Let me take off my phone here to make sure I'm on point. Got my notes here. We'll make sure I'm not leaving anything super important out. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now then is put on the HoloLens, do a little scan around the room. This app right here that I'm showing on the screen is a Windows Universal app that Microsoft has made that is pretty awesome, because what it lets you do is scan or project what the HoloLens is seeing into this app, and of course then you're able to see it on the screen for that reason. So let me make sure I'm updated here. All right. So it should come up here in just a second, hopefully. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Well, we give that a second to find itself on the network. In fact, I'll just bring it up again. So, Okay, there it goes. So now I'm going to do a live stream, and now you can actually see what I'm seeing through the HoloLens device itself, right? And so we have, this is a app that comes with the HoloLens called Holograms, and so I put him here a little bit earlier, a little tiger, and I think he got a hamster there, and some kind of planet with rings or whatever over there. But this is from, so if I pull up just the menu, when you have the HoloLens, you have this Holograms app, and that's what I was doing earlier. And so I can simply take any of the values or any of the objects that are in here and place them in the world. And so that's what you're seeing, like the hamster wheel or the puppy dog or anything else, Saturn. All right, so I'm going to remove that because it's kind of cool to show if people haven't seen it, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. Okay, the other bit I'm going to do then is minimize this. Assuming I can find it, right? Yeah. Probably a wormhole effect. Yeah. All right. Doing the same thing again. Let me grab this instead. Okay. So again, this is the scan. Make sure we hit update here. I wasn't expecting to happen, hopefully, because it's going to build that up again, but it's not doing that. So let me hit F5. There we go. And I'll get a little bit closer in here so we can see. So again, at any point using the HoloLens, I can tap in, and you'll see you're probably seeing a delay earlier. I meant to mention that. Between what I'm showing here and what you've seen on the screen could be a little bit of a delay when we're doing that using the other app. And that's just because there's a delay going from the HoloLens to the app itself. Usually it's network congestion, things of that nature. But as I'm tapping around, you'll see this, like all these different triangles. The mesh is being generated and it's being updated. So I can come back over here once I've kind of scanned the room, which again I've already done. I can come and hit update, and it'll have the absolute latest version of everything that I've already scanned. And so you can see it's pulling not just what I'm looking at right this second, but all the pieces of the mesh. All right. And again, what I can do is hit that save, and that will be that version. I'm not going to, well, might as well. I'll save that. And I've already done one of those, so I already have a SiegeCon spatial mapping. So all I want to do is actually bring that in. I'm going to take off the HoloLens here. All right. So back here in Unity, that Holo Toolkit has some prefabs that you can use, right? This is the other big powerful thing of the Holo Toolkit. Not so much the menu items. That helps you get started pretty quick. But there's this notion of, so if you can see here, I'm under the Assets, Holo Toolkit, Spatial Mapping. There's a prefab in here called Spatial Mapping. I can just drag this straight into my scene, and now my app can understand spatial mapping data. Okay? So what I can do is, over here in this room model, there's no game object. I could click this and type in SR, and they have one called SR Mesh, which comes with the Holo Toolkit. So if you didn't have a HoloLens yourself and can scan your own room, this is a mesh data that you can work with inside of your game, right? So the whole point of doing this is so that you can work on your game or your app or whatever it is inside of Unity and not have to deploy to the HoloLens to test every single thing. So if you're trying to set up some certain kind of physics environments or making sure that your collision detection is working or anything of that nature, you can do all that inside of Unity and speed up your development process. Okay. Instead of just bringing in, so you see this where it says draw visual meshes is checked. I don't know how that, let me see if I can pull that up a little bit more here. So right here, draw visual meshes is checked in the inspector window in Unity. So if you're not familiar with Unity, I'm not really going to obviously get into Unity and explain how everything works inside of Unity, but boils down to there's all these multiple scripts that you can associate to any particular game object. This spatial mapping prefab has these scripts that have already been built by Microsoft. You can modify different things. So for example, triangles per cubic meter is going to be how fine-grained your mesh is. So if I wanted a mesh that was really precise, I could bump that up to like 1200 or higher. But if I'm trying to do that in my game in real time, it's going to slow things down. So, but that can be really good to do if, like in the examples I was showing about Fragments and young Conker, they actually do that. They bump that triangles per cubic meter up so they can get a good sized mesh up front. And so you do a one scan, and that's actually part of the starting the game as you do that. And then it turns around and saves that mesh. I think they end up doing a little more filtering on it, so they smooth out different angles and try to make it watertight, if you will, so things don't fall through. I'll actually assume we have time, and I'm going to try to make sure we do have time. I'm going to try to show a demo of a little RC car thing that I've created. And since it's only scan part of the room, I could drive the RC car about halfway down the room, and then there's no more mesh. So it'll just fall off the earth and just kind of falls for a while. But what I think Fragments them do is they make sure that you're in a fully enclosed area, and then they're not constantly looking at trying to regenerate that mesh over and over again. Even though the HoloLens is constantly scanning and it's constantly seeing any changes in your world, your app can take advantage of that, or you can just kind of scan once. All right, but since I have this draw visual meshes enabled, and the surface material I'm using is just this wireframe, let me go ahead and get back out of that. I'll hit play. And over here, under Spatial Mapping, you'll see we just got a little triangle, and now we have this room mesh. Okay? And the room mesh actually has two parts. Okay? And I can't find any rhyme or reason as to how it breaks up the multiple meshes of that. All right, so, but either way, it is what it is. Right now, we have this room. That's the default SR mesh that Microsoft provided. Just one second. And that's that particular room that we can just work with inside of Unity. Unfortunately, I can't move around here because I haven't, the camera is set up for the HoloLens, but there's no input for me to do. So I'm going to set that up, but you had a question. Go ahead.
Those are the UVs on the other screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So it gives you UVs.
Yeah, you definitely have your UV, you even have normals and things of that nature. You can go through and reprocess different things in the mesh if you wanted to later. All right, but what I'm going to do is in my main camera, over here in the Holo Toolkit, I'm going to just look for like manual camera, and this is another script they have in the Holo Toolkit where I can drag this script, drag it to my main camera, and what that did is that lets me, inside of Unity, use that camera like I would, let's say, like a first-person shooter or whatever. And in fact, I'm going to change my mouse look button here to be right. So when I hit play again, leaving everything else alone, now I can like hold down my right mouse button and start turning around and looking around. Now, it's hard to see, that the mesh in just this wireframe look. So what I'm going to do now is click back on my spatial mapping, and instead of checking wireframe, I'm just going to pick like a default map. Let me get rid of him again. Default map. And now I hit play. We can actually see, a little bit easier to see in the Unity world of the material. Okay, so obviously there's no texturing involved here. The HoloLens is not doing any kind of textures. It does have a webcam, again, so it does have RGB. So in theory, you could be able to capture some of that information and possibly process it. But as it stands right now, really what you're getting is the 3D model. Okay, so there's that. I'm now going to import the mesh that I scanned of this room. And when I bring that into Unity, so right now it's importing it. Once I bring it in Unity, I'm then going to change that SR mesh, the default mesh, this kind of random room that we had, to our environment here. The next thing I'm going to do once that's in place is I'm going to create a sphere, just a ball, and I'm going to add in a script to that ball that when I have a reset, if you will, it will just drop the ball right in front of where I'm at. Okay, so now that we have this asset in here, the SiegeCon mesh, I'm going to drag this over top of my room model, that SR mesh. So instead of using the default SR mesh, now we're going to use the mesh of what I scanned earlier in this room. All right, so back on out of here. So there we go with all the chairs. All right. So hopefully that's visible. So that's the aisle, chairs, and here's up here where I'm at, behind the tables. Okay, so here we are. we had the HoloLens on, we scanned the room, saved the mesh, brought it into Unity, and now we can work with our environment inside of Unity. The physics and everything is already baked in, so I can come in here, right click, say we're going to create a 3D object called a sphere. Let me just reset the position on that guy and make him smaller, like 0.2. We'll see how that starts off with. Okay, and I'll just call him, I'll actually call him a ball. So you don't have to go through me typing on the screen. I'm actually going to bring in, it's pretty simple script. I'll open that up in Visual Studio. But I'm going to drag that ball script over top of my ball once it comes up. And what this is doing is I had a reset function that I've made. So I had a reset function. Let me make sure you can see this a little bit. I made a variable called distance that I could set, defaulted to 3, of how far in front of me I want the ball to be positioned if I hit reset. I just made a function called reset ball that actually positions the ball in front of me. So it positions it in front of my main camera's position, above my head by 1 unit, and in front of me 1 unit times that distance. So in this case 3. So it's kind of 3 units in front of me. And then I reset the velocity and the rotation to 0, basically. So that way, for example, like with my RC car, if I'm running it down the aisle and I fall off the world, and then I say reset, if my velocity wasn't reset to 0, then the car would be flying because it's going, what, 9.8. Yeah, I don't forgot the value, but either way, it's going fast. All right. So anyway, that is the script. That's all that's there. But rather than typing it out there, I'll just bring it in and tell you what I was doing. All right. So that's great. I could play this, but the ball is just going to kind of be in the world there, and that function's never going to be, the function's not going to get called unless I had a way to make it get called. So what I'm going to do now is add in another feature. So unannounced bonus for coming to this talk is you get to learn about voice recognition. So there you go. So I'm going to create an empty object and call it keyword manager. And there's different ways you can do this, but again, the Holo toolkit makes it super easy. And I can just look for keywords, and I can actually type in correctly keyword. And there's a keyword manager script I can go drag over to this object. And again, in the HoloLens documentation, you can actually go and write your own. In fact, most of the time, that's what I do. But for this, when you just have them try and do a simple command to call a particular function, you can't really get any easier than this. So I'm going to just make a size of 1. And now it's asking me what do I want my keyword to be. So I'm going to just type in the word reset. And then the key code is in the editor. If I didn't have my mic, which I don't have my mic hooked onto my laptop here, is how can I also kick off that function or whatever it is I want to do through a key. So I'll just do like spacebar, right? So this response is what I actually want to do. So this is the function I want to call, which is currently empty. There's nothing in there. And I'm sure that's probably hard to see again. So let me do that. So what I did, add in the script, change my size to 1, typed in reset as my keyword, hit space as my key code, and now I'm going to hit this plus sign and select my ball object. Of course, it's way over here. So select the ball object. Now I have to come back up here, so apologize for the heavy movement. All right, so now I'm going to hit the function, go down to, well, oh, wait a minute, did I actually put that on my ball? Let me get back out of this zoomed screen. All right, so ball. Yep, I have. No, I never did actually drag my ball script over there. So let's throw this out. So drag the actual ball script on my ball. Right, so now there's that distance. Since I made it public, I can modify this inside of the editor if I wanted to. So there. But now that I've done that, let me get back over to my keyword manager and click on my function. And now, since my ball object has that ball script, I can select him and then select the public function that I made available, which is reset ball. Okay. So, and again, the reason why that was even there is because of my ball object, I had the keyword as a public. So just much like your fields, that makes that available to you. Okay. So next, what we're going to do is run this in Unity, and we'll actually see some, wrong one, do the one we're actually working with here. And when I hit the space bar, now the ball will spawn in front of me and fall. So, so I'm kind of here in the front row, and did it right. Oh, thank you very much. Good man. Yeah, new rigid body. Yeah, so one critical piece that I kind of missed there is I need to add in, which Unity's telling me, this is what makes it so great. I don't know if anybody was in here for the panel earlier today, the very first session, but it's talking about the ease of Unity and the tools and things of that nature, and saying we don't have any room to complain about things these days compared to how they were 30 years ago. It was a good panel. You should definitely watch it later if you weren't able to see it today. But what I need to add in here is rigid body, because Unity very helpfully told me I need a rigid body. So that's for physics. So that's, again, it's a Unity thing. So in order for that to work, that's what I need. So appreciate calling that out. And sure enough, you can kind of see over here that the ball already fell from position 0, 0, 0 into the world. But we'll go over here to my game window and kind of up here in front of the front row and say, I won't say reset, I'll hit the space bar. And there it fell right in front of me, right? So yay. And just made that a little bit easier to see real quick. I'll create a new material. And the last thing I would suggest is you try and set up your project the way I'm doing. I'm just throwing everything in the root. But, it's what happens when you're doing demos and things on the fly. Obviously, when you're doing real work in Unity, you want to set your environment up and set your settings up in the way that makes sense. But anyway, I'm just going to call this test material. And didn't spell that right, but I really don't care at the moment. And change that to like red, and then drag that over to my ball. So now it might be a little bit easier to see. And in fact, let me also do this. Let me maximize on play, so it uses more of the screen. All right. And so now I come over here and hit the space bar, and it will fall in front of me, right? And so this the mesh itself has the colliders on there. So it knows that it, like for example, bounced in front of or bounced off of the table. The table's here, part of the stage, if you will. Okay, so that's good. We're actually doing good on time. So, probably because I was talking way too fast. So I'll apologize. I bet you I was, yeah. So sorry. So let me stop there for a second then, since I probably was talking too fast, since we're doing good on time. What questions do you have so far? What things did I totally fly over that you just have no, yeah, go ahead.
Is the room object, are the colliders mesh colliders, or are they optimized?
Okay. Right. So the question is the room, the mesh itself that was generated, is the colliders on them, are they optimized in any way, or are they mesh colliders? And it is a mesh collider, the best I can understand from what I've seen. So if you need it to do something different, there's this notion of spatial understanding, where once you actually have that mesh generated, you can go through and try to create more flat surfaces, in which case you can kind of generate your own boxes if you're doing that. But I was having a conversation even yesterday about it's best to see where your bottlenecks are before you worry too much about a particular thing. But that could potentially be a bottleneck, but usually that's not going to be too much to worry about. What other questions do we have? Go ahead.
When you're developing an app for Unity, do you have to have the room pre-rendered when you're developing, or can it develop it in real time? Like render the room in real time?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So when you have the room built in Unity.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, like, when you're developing the app in Unity.
Okay, when developing the app in Unity.
Can it render the room in real time, or do you have to pre-render the room?
So make sure I'm understanding. In Unity, can you render the room in real time, or does it have to be pre-rendered?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it has to be pre-rendered. Because you have to bring in the actual mesh. The spatial mapping This is for Unity. Obviously, once I have the HoloLens on my head, I'm looking around, it's doing everything in real time. It's all dynamic. So I can open the door and shut the door, and it knows that that geometry has changed, right? Well, again, we can put this table on the stage or take the table off the stage, and once I look at it for a few seconds, it'll realize that geometry has changed, okay? But if you're working inside of Unity itself, we're not doing any kind of feeding from the HoloLens directly into Unity, so it's definitely going to have to be like a static thing, a pre-done thing. It's not going to be a dynamic thing. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yep. What other questions do we have? Yep, go ahead.
Can you adjust the scan resolution so that you could scan a tabletop object or something?
Yes. So right here, let me show that. So, that's not what I want. So over here, what I have selected in my hierarchy is the Spatial Mapping Prefab. And so it has this Spatial Mapping Manager. I'm sorry, no, well, it has that, but it also has the Spatial Mapping Observer. And this has the triangles per cubic meter. And it's defaulted at 500. I could change that to 1200, and then when I run this app, then the HoloLens is going to be scanning that at 1200. So it's going to have a lot more fidelity than it does at 500. But it takes more processing power. So trying to run that in real time, it works really well if you're doing a scan up front. So like you start the game and you tell the user, hey, scan the room. And then you do it at that, and that's all the app's doing, because it's taking a lot of work to do that. And then you save the mesh, and then that's what you're using. You're no longer asking it to scan at 1200. You reset it to 500, even lower, because you don't care about the data at that point.
What about like a bounding box so it doesn't look like?
Right, yeah, and so that's where this extents right here, the 10 by 10 by 10. That's the bounding box it defaults to, and of course you can modify that. And the next one down, time between updates, is in seconds. So every 3.5 seconds is when it's trying to do that scan. And so you could make that smaller or higher depending on what your needs are. Yep.
What's the max you can go with it?
What's the max you can go with it? I do not know the max that you can go with. I'm not tried. So there's definitely been an article out there about it, and I read it, but I don't remember. Sorry. What other questions we have? We're going to another demo. No? All right. Well, if you have questions, just raise your hand as we're doing this, because kind of that's the main thing I wanted to go through. So that's good. So what I'm going to do now is actually show show this little RC demo thing. So again, I think I mentioned that I've been doing YouTube videos every week since I got the HoloLens. And so a couple weeks, well, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I brought in a 3D car and was just kind of messing around with it. And then a couple weeks ago, I shrunk the car down and hooked up the Xbox One controller. Okay, let me talk about that for a second. You can use an Xbox One controller as long as it's either one of the ones that you can design yourself or through the Xbox Design Lab, or like an Xbox One S controller, because those have Bluetooth capabilities. Okay, so the original Xbox One controllers don't have Bluetooth. So if you get a HoloLens and you want to have an Xbox One controller work with it, any controller, it just has to be Bluetooth enabled. Okay, go ahead.
So theoretically, could you put the headset on and jump into the Unity setup you have here?
Yes.
And drop the ball?
Yep. So I definitely can do that. In fact, that's why I got done so fast, because I didn't actually show deploying. I do want to do that. That takes a minute. So before I actually show my little RC card, let me talk about deploying, because that's kind of that's the big part. All right, so I'm gonna hit save project, get rid of this Zoom guy. He gets in my way. All right, so I'm gonna go to build settings inside of Unity and say add open scene. You'll notice that I'm already defaulted to Windows Store here. That happened because in the Holo Toolkit, as I'm looking at the HoloLens on now, but when I click the up here, let's just show you, Holo Toolkit, configure, project settings. When I did that project settings, that converted my Unity project from being a PC, Mac, Linux standalone to Windows Store. It also modified some things in the Windows Store so that it runs fastest versus fantastic. It's different scales of features that Unity lets you set. The other thing I want to set here is target device. I'm going to modify that, change that to HoloLens. And I want to select this checkbox that says Unity C# projects. Okay? So just to be clear, I open up build settings. I clicked add open scenes. I could have added any other scenes if I had them in here. I checked the Unity C# projects, and then my target device, I selected HoloLens. Okay? Then I'm going to click on player settings. And then over here, I could like turn off my splash screen or change my splash screen depending on your version of Unity. Those published settings that I talked about earlier, like I'm putting in the Holo Toolkit with the configure and capability settings, this guy. What that did is it just kind of set these values for me automatically. So it set this internet client. And right here it says microphone, and down here it says spatial perception. I'm not going to zoom in, it takes too much time, but trust me, that's what those checkboxes say. So now that I have made sure my capabilities are set and everything is good, which by simply using the Holo Toolkit, most everything is great, I can hit build. What that's going to do is it's going to bring up the File Explorer. I'm going to just make a new folder. I can call it whatever I want to, like UWP for Universal Windows Platform, or just app. We'll call it my app, and select folder. And what this is going to do now is actually build, make sure this is actually still working. It's actually going to build the solution project. And this is going to allow me to open this new solution in Visual Studio. So if you notice, I already have a Visual Studio solution open, the SiegeCon Spatial Mapping demo. But by debugging, I can just attach to Unity. What this thing is doing over in Unity right now is it's actually building a totally different solution. Bless you. It's building up a totally different solution that I will open up, and that is what I will use to actually deploy to the HoloLens itself. Okay? Or I can deploy it to the emulator. While we're just waiting on that to build, this here is actually the emulator. So you can kind of see this guy in here. This is just the HoloLens. Oh, help if I would click in the window. And so when I click, it's just like when I was air tapping in here, right? And I could deploy. Looks like it's almost done. Yep, looks like it's all right. So Unity's done. It built it, and now in this app folder, I have the SiegeCon Spatial Mapping demo. So I'm gonna open that up. And inside of here, I could deploy to the emulator I was just showing. I'm not going to do that for time's sake. Or I can deploy directly to the HoloLens itself. Okay, great. All right, so now this is coming up. The first thing you want to do in Visual Studio is change that from ARM down to X86. So it defaults to ARM. The machine's a 32-bit X86 machine, so you want to do that. Change it from local machine, and you could either do the emulator down here. So as long as you download those, the tools that I talked about at the very beginning, then when you install it, it will install this HoloLens emulator here. Or I can do it to the device if I plugged my USB cable from a device to my laptop. I could do that, right? I can deploy it directly to the device through the USB, but that's not convenient. Instead, we're going to do a remote machine. And I just need to put in my IP address, which is this guy here. Hope if I actually got the whole thing, but that's fine. I'll just type in one and paste and delete that. All right, and select that. So now that has associated, the machine I'm trying to deploy to is this HoloLens. So let's go ahead and hit play. And that will actually take a little bit. So while that's deploying, because that will take a little bit. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead.
So this is something we talked about last night. So obviously when you're in Unity, iterating on changes is pretty nice, but since you have to actually like build and deploy to the HoloLens for every single change to see it, how can you overcome that? Okay, so to have the true deployment experience, you're going to have to go through this iteration process. But there is a new feature. Now let's see if we can pull this up here again. So it's good. Hit back, live stream. So multiple things trying to talk to the device. Let's see how this works. Come on.
There is, because what I want to show you is an actual app that you can use now. They just released this 3 weeks ago, I think it was. It's called the Remoting Player app. And what it lets you do is you launch the app, and inside of Unity, there is so while we're waiting on this, there's actually a thing here in Unity, a window, called Holographic Simulation and Remoting, is what that says. Holographic Simulation and Remoting. You can click that guy, and did I really not do that? Project should have done that. That'll be problematic. What? We'll find out. Because it was just complaining at me that it needed, must enable virtual reality. So that's one of the things that the Holo Toolkit is supposed to do when it does the capability settings. Let's take a look at that real quick, because if not, then even when I just deploy, it's not going to do any settings. So let's go to player settings, and under other settings, yep, it did not. So that's, okay, interesting. That's a bug. Over here we see, this is important to see, so let me hit the zoom in here. The virtual reality supported. So again, this is under build settings in Unity. You gotta select that. That has to be checked true. And if it's not here, you hit the plus sign and select Windows Holographic. So let's do that. Hit this back out here, like that. All right, and save project, save scene, and we will also come back in here. Yeah, that's fine. Had deployment errors, deployment issues anyway, so that's fine. We're gonna hit build, select my app folder again, select folder. Let it do its deal. Okay, let's see if this is found. HoloLens yet. It is not. Why not? My HoloLens must have turned off. Yep, there it is. Come on. So it's mapping, it's saying it's trying to map the surroundings, which means that it's trying to figure out where I'm at in the world. And okay, once I look at enough walls where it's figured it out, this should come back to life for me. Okay, Unity in the meantime has finished building that. So we're going to open him up again by hitting reload all. Yeah, and that's why I failed to deploy, because my HoloLens obviously wasn't, it went to sleep because I hadn't done anything with it for a while. Which happens when you're talking a lot instead of developing. All right. But that's cancel. Should be trying to connect. Let me close this. Open up again. I had to do that a little bit earlier. It's always fun trying to work with network things as well and demos, but we'll get there. All right, so X86, I'll also try to deploy this to the machine. Okay, this is good. At least it now has that. Oh, the other thing that this will do is we get back to a wormhole situation. Is I forgot to, inside of Unity for this demo, I forgot to turn back on like wireframe, and so we're going to have like you're actually going to see like a white sheen over everything, because that's the material that I told it to do. So when it actually does the mapping, when it deploys, and let me actually see how far along it's coming here. So deploy started, it says. All right, 97 megs, it's going to copy over. So that's good. So we'll let that deploy. While we're waiting on that to deploy, let me go and see if there's any other questions out there. Yep, go ahead.
How long do the batteries last?
So batteries, how long do the batteries last? Not very long. I've seen in my typical usage, it's about an hour. It's about all I get out of it. So, they say it can last up to 2 or whatever, but what I've seen with what I use is about an hour. Yep. Go ahead.
When you were setting up the remote connection,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed to only, once you put in the address, it seemed to only accept one. Can you have multiple on the same network?
You can have multiple devices on your network, and you could, I don't know if you can deploy to more than one at the same time though. I only have one device, so I've never tried that. So I'm not sure. would have expected this to have deployed by now, so I'm going to check on this and see if we've gotten any issues. And if so, I'll pull out the Julia Childs and say, hey, this is it's just taking a while to copy over.
How long does it take to recharge the batteries?
Not long at all, 10 minutes or less. It seems to get it almost up to full charge for what I've been doing anyway. So it doesn't take too long. What other questions are there?
The battery packs removable? Can you have like several?
Nope. So the question was, is battery packs removable? First question, I don't know if I said it was how long does it take to recharge. It's about 10 minutes. But are the battery packs removable? They're not. It's just, the device is what it is. You're just, not getting into it. Okay, well, this is acting like it is deploying or has deployed. So, means it should be, let's see what we got. Okay. So I'm just trying to find our little demo here. What it should have done was start automatically, but here's our little SiegeCon spatial mapping. So it did deploy, but here we go. So now we're seeing the nice, since I didn't do the wireframe, I should have done the wireframe, but again, I'm not going to do it now because it'll take too much time. But what it's doing is it crashed, so that's good. Let's do that again. And it could be, okay, here it comes. I say the app didn't crash because it came back so quick. Something's not up. That's interesting. All right, well, either way, I think you get the point. Well, I'm going to show you what's not crashing, which is also kind of cool since we're about out of time. Time is, 52. So this here, as soon as it comes up, and let me move the mouse here so you get the full screen effect. Oh, the other thing let me do is make sure this isn't still debugging. That could be one of my issues as well, is trying to debug inside of Visual Studio. Still, so let me hit stop on that. All right, and pull this back up. Okay, so what you're seeing here, hopefully, so any kind of lag that you're seeing between, what I'm doing and what's on the screen is just the connectivity between the HoloLens and my laptop. So what I'm going to try to do here is say, and do you mind moving? Thank you, sir. Reset. Oh, let's try it again. Reset. He's upside down. That's helpful. Reset. There we go. All right. So I just have my Xbox One controller hooked up. So I got a little RC car kind of running around with. Right? So of course, I can't see him because he's behind my mesh here. So, of course, I look funny up here just with a HoloLens thing on my head and controller in my hand. It's like there's nothing that's actually there. But fortunately, I made it so you can see on the screen. But this is using the exact same thing, right? So there's another bit in the Holo toolkit called Spatial Understanding. And what it lets you do is see things like, it's actually released by the same guys who did Fragments and Young Conker. And it lets you ask things like, what's a sittable object? Or find me a sittable object, or place this object on the largest wall in the room, and things of that nature. So beyond just the mapping of it, it's an understanding. Well, this wireframe that we're seeing here, the multicolored wireframe, it's actually taken from that spatial understanding. And it changes based off how close it is. So the color scheme is just simply how close the camera is to it, and it will just continue to change that way. So that's all that's doing. Okay. Since we're about out of time, I'm going to, didn't want to show you that. But since there was a specific question about the remoting player, I did want to get into that. So let me actually close this guy down. Okay. So let's get rid of this. Go to here. Okay, I opened up the store somehow. Don't know how I did that. Guess I was going to play something instead of getting the talk. I don't think so. Okay, so inside of Unity, I was talking before about this window, holographic simulation and remoting. So back to the question about speed of development iteration. And this is something that was just, really just happened, very, very recent. So I can actually go, let's see, I'll bring it up over here. And you can't see what I'm doing. So let me, let me go back. Oh, I must have closed that window. All right, let's do that again. HoloLens. Live stream. We got about 4 more minutes. So be thinking about any other questions you might have here. But I did want to show this off. So this app is called Holographic Remoting. And what it's doing is saying, hey, here's your device's IP address, 10.193.89.146. And then, so that's what I'm seeing here in the HoloLens. So I'm going to minimize this, get back out of the live stream, minimize that. And of course, I already know what my IP address is because it's up here, so I'll just copy that. Well, assuming I can actually do it here. All right. Copy that, paste it into Unity, remote machine, automatically connect, hit connect, and hit play. Now, this is beneficial for different things. Spatial mapping is kind of interesting on that. Let me hit disconnect. It's definitely finicky. This is obviously brand new. Like I said, it's only been out for about 2 or 3 weeks. Of course, I mean, the HoloLens itself is basically brand new since April. But it can be a little finicky to get connected immediately, especially if you're trying to have it connected there and connected on the live stream itself. But we'll hit play, see if I can get connected here first. I was hoping this would work out. But either way, if I can't get this to work immediately, this is the process. You open up the, what do I do? You open up the holographic remoting guide there, which you can't see because I'm not streaming. Catch the, all right. So the holographic remoting app is what you want to run. And then inside of Unity itself, you want to make sure that you have, click on that window, click on holographic simulation and remoting, which brings up this window. You put in your IP address, and you should be able to say automatically connect, and hit play. And then whatever's inside the Unity world, you should see right out here. And again, trying to do the spatial mapping thing is not necessarily the best demo for this type of deal. It's better like if you're just trying to just like had a holographic object in front of you and that you're fooling with inside your world itself. Because this app doesn't, let me explain that for a second, I'll take this off. The reason why spatial mapping isn't a great use of this holographic remoting app, it's really beneficial, it can help you speed up your development, but it's all about what Unity sees. And so as long as you bring in that scan to begin with, you can kind of fake it, but it's still whatever Unity sees. And as you're moving your head around with the HoloLens, it's actually moving your camera in Unity, okay? So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that to work for you, but that is the premise. It's just those 2 apps. I think it's just too much stuff on the network. It's having, plus me trying to stream between the 2 things, so either way. So we are right at 3 o'clock. So what other questions are there before we wrap up? Go ahead.
You just trying to show us where your field of view is when you were.
Yeah, so what you're seeing on the screen is my field of view that the HoloLens is doing. But of course, my eyes can see more than that. So that is definitely a common complaint of the HoloLens is, well, the field of view is small. And if you're trying to compare the HoloLens to a virtual reality device, then yeah, it's definitely a whole lot smaller. And that's why it's kind of hard to get a virtual reality experience to work well in the HoloLens. I mean, you can display anything in the world, right? On the Holo Toolkit, when I set up that camera, it blacks out everything, deletes your skybox and everything else. But you could obviously have a skybox and have your full 3D world in there, but it's not very immersive because your field of view, is kind of like about right here, right? And which is great when you're looking at, adding things into your world, little, dogs or tigers or whatever else, like that's fine. But when you're trying to have this whole other experience, it does make it difficult. At the same time, the first time that I ran, there's a demo or an app that Microsoft has called HoloTour. Well, I don't know if Microsoft's the one that actually made it, but either way, somebody made it as one of the launch titles called HoloTour, and it's basically a virtual reality app. And the first time I did it, I was extremely immersed. Like, afterwards, I ran it a few more times. It's like, oh no, I can totally see around. But when I was doing it the first time, of course, it was one of the first apps I did, and just totally blown away with the HoloLens in general. Like, my focus was not, oh, the field of view is small. It was like, well, this is really cool. I'm in room, so it can be done, but obviously the novelty of that wears off pretty quick. And then you can say, well, I can kind of see my room above and below and on the sides and then kind of, take away. So certain experiences are definitely better in the augmented or mixed reality. So any other questions? We'll take one more before we end. Yep, go ahead.
In this demo, you brought in the environment into Unity. How would the process be different if the application or game that they're using, they need to provide their own environment?
So make sure I understand the question. The demo I did was bringing in my environment into Unity. How would it be different? What would you have to do differently if you're using somebody else's environment or just a unique?
Like a store app, right? So they download the app and they need to provide their own environment. How's the process different for being able to bring in their environment into the
Okay, yeah, perfect. So the question is, okay, well, you have your app in the store, somebody downloads it, how they bring their environment in. And that's basically kind of an automatic thing. So what I did not make clear, and I'm very glad you asked that question because I see I did not make that clear at all. When this whole map that I brought in, that's like an optional thing. Like you don't have to do that for Unity. That's to help me to see, well, how's my ball going to bounce? What physical properties should I give the ball to make it act the way I want to act inside of Unity with my own environment? But I didn't have to do that. And when I deploy it out, or when somebody downloads it from the store, the app is actually scanning their environment, right? So if here on the stage, if I bounce the ball or drop the ball and it hits the table and then bounces off and rolls or whatever, and that's great. In somebody's house, my mesh, whatever I was using inside Unity, like that's not even brought in. It doesn't even matter. It's what they're scanning in their house, so it bounces off their couch and rolls around. So it doesn't. That's definitely what it does. Is it scans around and it doesn't. That spatial mapping prefab, that one object here. Let me actually just pull it up here instead of just waving my hands and talking about it. This room model on the bottom right. That doesn't have to be filled out at all. I mean, to deploy the app to the store. And once you do deploy to the store, it's pretty much ignored, right? So this is really just a Unity. The script inside there basically says, if I'm in this Unity editor, then display this mesh. Versus if you're not in the Unity editor, it's not going to display that mesh. It's going to be using the mesh that the HoloLens is mapping at the time. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, I totally did not make that clear earlier. Very appreciate you asking that. All right, I believe we are out of time. But I want to be here. So by all means, come up, and I believe we're supposed to start the town hall, whatever, soon. So thank you very much for coming and attending the session.